Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a pretty complex story about how one single Supreme Court decision could totally upend the balance of global economic power. We're talking about a shift from a delicate trade relationship into a completely one-sided loop.
So you might be thinking, soybeans? Really? But yeah, the global soybean trade is actually the stage for this massive geopolitical showdown. It's basically a proxy war, but instead of weapons, they're using economic tools. And you've got the world's two biggest economies on either end of that rope.
Okay, so to really get what's at stake here, we've got to look at how things work right now. And the best way to picture it is as a kind of trade triangle. It's this really fragile, carefully managed balance between the US, China, and Argentina.
Right, and this is super important. This isn't just a simple case of you buy, I sell. No, it's a strategic tug of war. Each country has its own unique tools, its own levers of influence that it's using to try and pull the market in its favor.
So let's talk about the US toolkit. Right now, the United States has a couple of really powerful tools it can use to shape this whole trade triangle. And these levers, they give it a massive advantage in this competition, letting it, actively steer the market.
All right, tool number one. Our source material calls this the price-based steering wheel, which is a great way to think about it. It's all about speed and agility. It's this power the president has, thanks to a law called the IEEPA, to just rapidly change tariffs. In a flash, they can make U.S. soy way cheaper and a lot more attractive to buyers.
So what's China's play? Well, their countermove is something called the China swap. And if the U.S. tool is a steering wheel, this is more like a giant anchor. China provides a bunch of financing to Argentina, and in doing so, it creates what you could call a sticky supply chain. It's designed to be totally immune to those quick price changes from the U.S., effectively locking Argentina into China's economic orbit.
So you see the dynamic here, right? It's this really fundamental tension. On one hand, you've got the U.S. using its quick, agile steering wheel to shake things up and pull demand over to its side. And on the other, you have China using its heavy financial anchor to dig in, entrench its position, and just lock the whole system down. It's really a battle of speed versus structure. Okay, so everything we've just described, this finely balanced system, a potential Supreme Court ruling is about to drop a bomb right into the middle of it. We're talking about something that could snap one side of that tug-of-war rope completely. So let's dig into how one single legal doctrine could literally change the entire game.
And at the very heart of this potential earthquake is something called the Major Questions Doctrine. Let me break it down. In simple terms, this principle basically says that for huge, nationally significant issues, like, say, setting tariffs that affect the whole economy, the executive branch can't just use a broad interpretation of an old law like IEEPA. Nope. They need clear, explicit permission from Congress. And as you can imagine, getting that is a much slower process.
So what happens if the court actually uses this doctrine in its ruling? Well, it's not just about weakening one tool. It's way bigger than that. It would trigger a whole cascade of effects that would basically break the entire system we've been talking about. That balanced triangle, it would just collapse.
And you can really see the domino effect here. Okay, so step one, the court's ruling narrows IEEPA, and boom, the U.S. loses that tariff steering wheel. Then that creates what's called a chilling effect on other emergency financial tools, like the Exchange Stabilization Fund, or ESF. People get scared to use it because of the legal risk. And what's the end result? The U.S. is left with basically no levers to pull. Both tools are gone.
So let's do a quick before and after. First, the before picture. Right now, the system is balanced. The U.S. has its active levers, that steering wheel with tariffs, and the stabilization tool with the ESF. You've got that balanced USA-China-Argentina triangle, and Washington is a key player that can actively steer how things go.
But then, one ruling happens, and the entire game just changes. The whole architecture gets transformed. The game board is completely redrawn, and the balance of power, it shifts, maybe for good.
And now, let's look at the after. Suddenly, the U.S. levers are paralyzed. That tariff tool is constrained, the ESF is legally risky, they're basically useless. So that balanced triangle, it collapses into a bilateral loop, just a straight line between China and Argentina. And the U.S., it's stuck on the outside just looking in.
The outcome here is just so stark. And this quote from the source material really says it all. China becomes the only actor with a functioning lever. I mean, think about that. China keeps full control over its yuan swap, when to use it, what currency to trade in, everything. Meanwhile, the U.S. has its own tools taken away and can do nothing but watch.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this all sounds pretty abstract, just geopolitics. But this is not just a theory. This has real, direct consequences for real people, for the U.S. economy, and for its standing in the world.
Just take American farmers, for example. The impact on them could be immediate and really, really severe. They could find themselves completely locked out of the massive Chinese market. They'd lose their ability to compete against an Argentina that now has what our source calls an artificial advantage, thanks to that China swap. The whole trade loop basically solidifies, and it just bypasses U.S. agriculture entirely.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway here, which is summed up so perfectly in this quote from the source. A Supreme Court ruling would cripple the U.S. ability to use tariffs or emergency liquidity tools, effectively shifting control of the triangular system toward Beijing. That's really the bottom line. This one ruling could cripple the key tools of U.S. economic statecraft in this whole arena, and the power to control this critical trade system, it would shift decisively from Washington to Beijing.
And all of this leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question to think about. When a superpower loses its economic levers, who picks them up? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about soybeans, is it? It's about the very tools of economic power in the 21st century. And it suggests that if a nation voluntarily puts down its most effective tools, it really can't be surprised when another global power picks them up and starts using them to redraw the map.